Welcome to Jumpsuiters, a podcast where we explore multi-dimensional topics in a practical 3D reality sort of way. Today's episode is going to be a little different because I'm bringing on a guest to talk with me about ketamine.
You just casually were talking about doing ketamine during this LinkedIn Live, of all places on LinkedIn, like of all social media platforms. And I had always wanted to talk about my experience with ketamine. And then I saw you do that and I was like, well, what the hell? I could have been doing this the whole time.
Just to give context for like this conversation, it would be really cool to explore out loud what the experience of taking ketamine is like. And because we're neurodivergent, like find some patterns like, oh, you too, like that. I haven't really had that experience much in life to do that with someone. So that just feels kind of important and exciting to me. But also both you and I are having experiences where a lot of people are starting to come to us and they're saying like, hey, I've been thinking about trying ketamine and I've got questions. And so it just kind of feels timely and important and fun to be able to have this conversation and record it. So it can be also like a utility to point people back to and say, here, like we made this, go check it out. Maybe it'll answer some questions. And then also we had a conversation the other day where we kind of added to that idea. And I said, this is what I do. I said, what if we do ketamine? So after this call, I'm actually going to go through a ketamine journey, and James is going to be here filming it. And you're going to do it at some point too? Have you just decided?
Yes, on Sunday, so in 2 days.
Yeah, amazing. That's probably something I won't put on LinkedIn. Like, that'll probably be gated on my Patreon, but still pretty excited to do it. And I'm probably not going to like just upload the raw, everyone gets to watch everything and hear everything that I say and experience, but more of like here's what the process is like, here's kind of what was happening for me in this moment, and I get to kind of be in control of what I am comfortable being vulnerable with. Cool. Well, I'm excited for that. But I guess to dive into the world of ketamine for the sake of this podcast, I want to start with hearing how long you've been doing it and why you started doing it in the first place.
I think it was like May of 2022.
Oh, you've been doing it for a couple of years.
A minute now. Yeah. And so, interestingly, I had been exploring complex trauma with my psychiatrist already. We were doing a lot of work together, and she mentioned just kind of like, I'm just going to let you know that I'm doing this thing. I have like gone through training to do like ketamine therapy, ketamine assisted therapy. And she was like, no pressure at all. I just want you to know that this is an option if you're curious. And I'm already pretty open to that kind of stuff. But then the fact that it was her suggesting it and bringing it up was really exciting to me and made it feel like a really safe thing for me to at least try. And so, yeah, it was just kind of something that could supplement our work that we were already doing together and maybe help speed up some healing in the process, just like see what it leads to. So yeah, I've been doing it for quite a while and I've done it in a couple of different ways, but it's been
as far as like orally or intramuscularly, is that how you mean? Or do you mean like done it at a rave and
No, I've never done ketamine recreationally.
Yeah.
It's always been under her like supervision. So I think I did 4 sessions in office with her. And then after that, that was very expensive. And so I was able to switch to doing at home, which was so nice. I have so much autonomy to like do it exactly how it feels good.
I have only done that one time. I'm going to do it again today. The lozenges are disgusting. Do you agree?
Yes.
They're the bitterest motherfuckers I've ever had in my life. But the benefit, like they're way more affordable. You get to do it. Yeah, you don't have to leave. Completely agree. I typically do it with my therapist. And my doctor is below my therapist. It's a very integrative practice, which is cool. And so a nurse will come up and give me a shot in the arm. And it's such a different experience. It's the same medicine, but this one, the shot happens so much faster. But yeah, I think it'd be cool to kind of talk a little bit about like, what does ketamine feel like? I think that's a question that a lot of people ask me. Like, I think a lot of people, by the time they're inquiring with me, they have heard about it. They've researched it a little bit. They understand that it's legal and it's an option. I can order it online from Mind Bloom, or there's someone locally, so it's like available to me. But like, what's it like?
Yeah, well, and the people that have come to me about it, most of them have done some sort of psychedelic. So there's a frame of reference for a psychedelic, but not for ketamine in particular. And it, from my experience, it is quite distinct. It's a distinct experience. And even just the change from doing the in-person, I did the intramuscular injection in office, to the lozenges, even just that has been different. And then also, I'm just gonna just to add context, and like if this needs to be cut out later or not, it's fine. But and I think I mentioned this to you before, I would just rather be completely transparent about this. But like, so I did the lozenges and I had them like sublingually for a while, and it would, when I did the injection and when I did the lozenges, I got a lot of nausea, and it would like stick around for a while afterwards. And I hated that. I didn't like the taste. I didn't like that. The sensory part of it would sometimes pull me out of the experience. So with my my nurse practitioners, I guess we'll say like blessing, I started exploring other ways, and I was like looking up on forums online, like other ways that people do this and make it better for themselves. And so
what I think they're gonna say.
Yeah, I think so, probably. So they do make a suppository of
I didn't know. Amazing.
It's already like a thing that exists. So at least it's like out there, but at least it's not like I'm like making shit up, I guess. But
so I feel the need to tell James we're not doing that later. Don't worry. And wow, so you don't experience nausea that way, huh?
Hardly at all. Like if I can kind of adjust my dose with like the lozenges, and it's similar on yours, but they're scored. So yep. I can like cut them, and my prescriber is cool with me doing like between 100 to 200 milligrams, whatever feels good to me.
See, I don't experience nausea. I've never had nausea once. I just feel like that's important. I'm not trying to like interrupt, but like I think it's important in general. Like, everyone responds differently to it. I've never experienced nausea once, in any form that I've taken it, and I typically do 200 to 300 milligrams. So I'm gonna do probably like 250 today. I think it'll be something like that. So yeah, it's like, what is it like to take ketamine? It's such a journey, right? Because there's the whole like, you've got to prepare for it and actually ingest it somehow, and like that's its own experience. And then it starts to hit you, and it kind of takes you on a journey. And then there's the coming off of it, just to kind of like get into that part faster. Here's the way that I normally explain what it feels like to me, and I'm curious if you agree or if you would describe it differently. But to me, ketamine feels like a river. It feels like it just kind of maybe the first thing I experience is an awareness of my breath, almost like breath work. It's like I am my breath. It's all I think about, and then I start to tell that I am dissociating from my body, and it's not like I'm like floating above my body like a near-death experience. It's just like my body is not heavy anymore. It's not, I'm not experiencing sensory overwhelm like I normally am. Like, it's just instant relief that I'm just like a consciousness existing without a body feels incredible. And then it's like this river comes, and this river is like exploring my subconscious. It's the best way I know how to describe it, where even if I went into ketamine with an intention, like I really want to work on this thing today, it's almost like I forget. It may be there, it may not, but the river comes and it just kind of like moves me from one thing to another. And one thing might be like a trauma that I'm processing without the ego feeling scared or protective or something. And there's like a lot of safety and openness in that experience. And then, like a dream, I'm onto something else with no rhyme or reason. It could be an insight, or I've had experiences where it just didn't really feel like there's any sort of meaning at all. Like I remember one moment where I'm like, I think I'm an amphibian, and I'm like jumping on these like bioluminescent lily pads, and it's like lighting up like the environment, and I'm like, that's fun. And now I'm back dealing with something with my mother, right? So it kind of feels like that to me. Would you agree, or would you describe it differently?
It's really interesting to hear the way that you describe it, because it feels like the actual sensation of it feels very similar to me, but I hadn't ever compared it to like a river. But it does feel like I'm being kind of like I'm floating and I'm being carried. It feels safe. It was like I was just my consciousness. Like my physical body wasn't really a thing anymore. You know, kinetic sand, just like what it looks like, the different colors, all of that stuff. It felt like I was amongst a lot of kinetic sand, and I was a grain of that sand. And so I felt very small, but I felt like I was with my like kinetic sand brethren, basically. And we were like floating along almost like it was a river of kinetic sand. And that would happen a lot whenever I did the injections, that particular feeling or sensation of that. And it felt very like we're just like, I'm safe. We're like on this journey. And I also would kind of be communicating with my sand family, and they would be like, Neely, come on, let's go. Like, they didn't tell me where we were going or what was happening, and that was fine. It was just like, we gotta go. We all need to go together. Which was just such an odd thing to kind of try to recount and like describe to my prescriber afterwards. Like,
yeah,
totally.
Yeah, it's full of odd experiences, and not all of them in my experience are strange, but sometimes they are. Like I remember the first time I ever did it, I remember seeing a light orb and just had this knowing that was my mom. Like my mom is a soul. And as I got closer to this light orb, there was like this, I guess, telepathic connection or something that was able to be made. And I was experiencing my mom in a way where she was completely uninhibited by being Penny. That's my mom's name. Like the parts of Penny that are hard for me to relate to or connect with or get in the way. My mom has autism, we think. And there's like history and trauma there, and there's love, but it's like, it's hard, right? But like all of those things that get in the way in real life didn't exist in that moment. And I was able to experience connection and love in a way that like caused me to understand and grieve the fact that I won't have this on Earth. I won't be able to get even close to this, probably. Maybe closer, but I won't have that. But it was such an embodied experience that it healed me anyway. And I was able to completely reframe how I perceive my mom. And so, like, there's just so many moments like that with ketamine where I leave it And it's really easy to be like, well, that was weird. Like, and you describe it and you kind of sound like, am I a crazy person for having an experience? But I think for me, the integration afterwards with my therapist to like drop into like, no, like, what did that cause in your body? Like, what kind of new neural pathways can we rewire together? Because that was such a real embodied experience. And how can we go back somatically to that experience? Like, what did it feel like? And can you get there again? Right? That's the work that's been changing my life.
I had something similar, and I didn't go into it. I didn't have an intention of like connecting with my father. My father passed away from cancer in 2017, and we had a very tumultuous relationship, very complicated. And I wasn't going into this session like, I wonder how my dad's doing, or even really like having him in mind. But he presented himself. I didn't see his face. I don't tend to see faces in my imagination anyway, or in my mind, but I just knew that it was him. I didn't question whether it was anything else. I just knew that it was him. It was his essence. And there was a very calming presence about it, which in the real world, I never would have associated him as like a calming presence. But it was so comforting. And it was this kind of closure that I couldn't have like forced that to happen, or like even asked for it to happen and actually had it happen. It just needed to happen when it did. And I was able to, even just since then, when I think about losing my dad, it feels so much less heavy than it did before that experience.
Wow, that's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I think it's, it's almost pointless to be like, was that real? Was that really my dad? It's just like, it doesn't even matter. Like, you're healing. And maybe it was, but it's like, right. It's more about the journey, the healing journey that we're on, and what ketamine's able to unlock. And I had a moment where I met a spirit animal. I don't know if it was a spirit animal. I don't know what it was. It was a praying mantis. I knew that. It was a praying mantis head, and it was like 8 inches from my face. And I had this moment of telepathy with it, where it didn't say anything out loud, but I heard it loud and clearly, and it told my brain, shut up. And then it told me to connect with my heart. And I had this like light, this like opening, and this light beam connect my heart and its heart. And it was a channel. I was feeling a lot of sensation, but there was like no words, no meaning of anything. And then it was gone, and I was like, that was weird. Like, that was weird. That's what, maybe like the part of psychedelics that like I was originally afraid of to experience, but it wasn't scary in the moment it was happening. And again, I'm not trying to like make meaning of it and be like, it was my spirit animal, or like it was a mantis alien connecting with me. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know, but like it was a really interesting experience. And then the next day, my wife is going on a walk with her friend Kindy, who I think you met at the roadshow. They're on a walk together, and Ashley looked down, and there was a praying mantis on the ground, and I like turned and looked at her, and then walked up her whole body and stopped like right here. And she came back and I was like, you're never gonna believe this. And I'm like, I have no words. I don't know. And I've had some experiences where what happens in ketamine gets reinforced with a synchronicity in life. And I bring that up to say, there is, for me, a spiritual, like existential kind of like experience that I'm having with it, other than it being very practical, like trying to heal CPTSD or something. Have you had spiritual experiences on ketamine?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the main kind of way that it's felt spiritual has been it's allowed me to kind of tap into my own like insignificance and like smallness in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming and terrifying. Basically, it feels comforting. I feel more connected to everything around me than prior to ever doing these things. So that's part of it. Also, just I feel like when I did connect with my father, that felt very spiritual in the sense of like, again, if I had tried my hardest and if all of the stars had aligned and really wanted that to happen and like to make it happen without ketamine, I couldn't have forced that, basically. Like that, whether or not there's concrete meaning behind it and that was him or not, it doesn't matter, because I needed that.
Yeah.
When it happened, I needed it then. Like, it helped me a lot.
You need it now, right? It sticks with you. Yeah, and I think when I started doing ketamine, I would tell people, like, a single session with ketamine feels like 10 years of therapy. And then you do it again, and you're like, 10 more years of therapy. I mean, it's wild. And then I did a journey where I used psilocybin and ketamine together, and that felt like a lifetime of therapy. I'm not telling people to go do that, but I am personally very curious on how to consciously work with pairings of things. But yeah, and it's like, to me, for that reason, ketamine is absolutely worth it.
Yeah, it's not the only kind of therapy that I'm engaging in. Like, I've also found EMDR to be really transformative, and parts work, IFS, that stuff. But this, it's put my brain in a state that allows for growth and healing in such a way where maybe it's allowed me to talk about or cover things in EMDR sooner and to feel safer to do it when I did, then it might have taken me a little bit longer to feel like I could touch on those topics if I didn't have ketamine, like helping just like the inner workings and my brain chemistry in general. There's this way that my prescriber has described what ketamine does, like, to the brain. And the way that, like, I try to, like, quote her on it, but it's not, whatever. We'll see where it goes. But she described it as, like, if you imagine you're driving a car, like, say a Jeep in, like, a bunch of mud, and you're, like, driving in circles. So the mud starts to build up on either side of the wheels. So you start to get stuck, and you can't just, like, turn out of that circle. You're, like, stuck. That represents, like, the default mode network. Then whenever you take ketamine, it's like it floods that plane, levels it out to where you can decide which direction now to go in and create a new path that you would have needed something to kind of shake you out of that to begin with. And that always really resonated with me, especially that's how she would basically describe, like, the neurogenesis and neuroplasticity that's happening in between sessions. Like, not even just when you're under or when you're tripping. Like, there's stuff that's happening up there that's helping to heal us over time too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much stuckness, especially as a neurodivergent, especially having a little bit of the autism, so much stuckness. And I think, I forget how you phrased it, but, like, sometimes in life, when we get really, really stuck, it seems the universe intervenes with something big and drastic, a death, a divorce, like something that can be really intense and painful, that pushes us to the point where we like surrender and we are like more open and willing to dive into the shadow and be honest with ourselves and face things that have felt too hard or too shameful or whatever. Like sometimes it feels like you've got it, and I'm speaking at least for myself, like just to have your kneecaps taken out for you to like face that. And that's traumatic in and of itself. And to have the ability to go to a psychedelic and say, I'm coming here with full consent right now for you to like reveal, like dissolve my ego enough so it can rest for a moment, so I can feel safe, so I can be like experience true openness, so I can look at what you have to show me and do it in such a like usually gentle, loving way, not always, and for it to have such an impact and to be able to go back to it again and again when you experience that stuckness is incredible. It's changed my life.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I feel very fortunate that because like I didn't need to find this myself. It literally came to me. I probably wouldn't have sought it out for a number of different reasons, especially at the time that I started doing it. And so I feel like it found me, and it was like, all right, something's got to give at this point. You've been struggling for so long and you're like ready for some relief. And maybe this can be a part of that. Yeah. And it's proven to be the case for sure. And even like it's helped me. There's this one instance that I remember that always stood out to me where I did ketamine right before I had this, there was a call that I was going to join, and it was like a bunch of neurodivergent strangers, and it was just like, join us and we'll just like stim together and like chit chat and whatever. And I was planning on doing that after I did the ketamine. And I remember when the ketamine kicked in, I was like, there was some thought that I had that immediately floated away. And we've talked about like with, we both have ADHD. So like, that's not an uncommon experience where it's like, oh no, I wanted to explore that and now it's gone. And that started to happen with whatever the thought was. And I've literally, in my mind, I like chased after and caught up with the thought and was able to pull it back, almost like I let go of a balloon or something, and like pull it back and be like, oh, this is what that was. And I was able to dig deeper into that. Like, I did that. It felt like I did it, and
Incredible.
It was crazy. And then afterwards, I joined that call. I was like, just so everybody here knows, I just did ketamine. Hi, what's up? And they were like, oh my gosh, like share whatever you want about that. And I mentioned that part. And they were like, whoa, that's wild, just being able to, I don't know how to describe it. Like I have a little bit more control of like capturing those things and not letting them just dissolve into the void.
That's so cool. Yeah, you use the word the void. That's right. I mean, I don't know how what ketamine looks like the backdrop. And I'm always in an eye mask or whatever, so it's like naturally dark. But like, it's always been black for me. It's just like I'm in this black void, and everything that I'm experiencing, whether it's like geometric shapes or colors or whatever, it feels very like geometry, like in my experience at least, very ethereal, except for when I did it with psilocybin, the backdrop was white. I don't know, that was kind of interesting. But yeah, the void is such an interesting concept in general. I'm into dimensions, you've heard me talk about it, but it's like it's this place where it's just pure consciousness. And nothing exists yet other than the ability of like everything's full potential. And I feel like there's some sort of interesting connection there. It's like, it's almost like it just like takes you to that place where it's like, okay, what do I want to like experience with my consciousness? And I'm curious, like it's just such a like specific thing that I've observed. Is it black background for you all the time, or is that just me?
Usually, yes, it's black background. Like almost always, especially when I started doing the at-home treatments. So whenever I did the in-person ones, that's whenever I had that kinetic sand. That was like a recurring thing, probably for all 4 of those in-person sessions. And it was, what stood out to me was how brightly colored the kinetic sand was. There were multiple different colors of sand, and they were moving like along. And it was interesting because it felt bright. That particular whatever I was in felt bright because the colors around me were bright, and the backdrop didn't seem like it was as dark as it is now whenever I do these sessions at home.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was like a lightness element.
Yeah, light and color, that tends to be a thing with psychedelics in general. I remember having an experience where I remember feeling sad for a moment that I was experiencing anxiety, because normally when I'm doing ketamine, I don't feel any anxiety. And I remember saying like, oh no, anxiety's here. And my therapist was like, that's okay. Can you welcome it? And I'm like, yes. But it was interesting because I wasn't experiencing anxiety in my body because I didn't have a body. I was experiencing, I think maybe this is synesthesia potentially, but I was experiencing anxiety as a wave. And I was just a knowing, like it wasn't labeled anxiety. It wasn't making me feel anxious. I just saw it and knew that it was anxiety. And I remember saying, yeah, it's a wave. It's brown. And so, she kind of guided me through like just accepting and welcoming, and then eventually like an emotion or anything, it goes away. And after the journey, I remember being like, I'm just like gonna Google it. I'm just gonna ask Google like, what color is anxiety, and see what it says. And it said it was brown. I don't know who gets to decide that, but yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Let me give you like Nicole before ketamine, what it was like to be in her body as a neurodivergent person. I didn't even know I was neurodivergent until a couple years ago. Very uncomfortable. Nicole did not like being in her body. The body felt heavy. It was always moving. Talk about stims and stuff. I've been stimming for as long as I can remember. The first time I became aware of my stimming, I was in 2nd grade, and I remember a girl in my class looking at me and being like, why do you do that? And I'm like, do what? And she's like, that thing with your nose. And I was like, what am I doing? And I just remember I was like, I had been scrunching my nose. And I can't even like do that multiple times, or I can tell I want to keep doing it. So I'm going to stop. But it was like, I got really self-conscious. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I was doing it. So, and then I remember realizing like, by blocking that, it went to my eyes. So I started blinking a lot. And then I got self-conscious for that. And then over time, my stimming turned into they call it complex stims or tics, where it's just kind of throughout your body. So always moving, tapping, tensing my muscles, clearing my throat, licking my lips if you like, got a lot of your sniffing. And when it was all very unconscious, right? Like, I was able to mask it really well because I would spread them out and I wouldn't get stuck doing the same thing in the same place. But like if you were sitting next to me on a couch or like laying in bed with me, like my partner, like she'd be like, stop, you're like constantly moving. And so that is a lot of, like overstimulation happening, not to mention other sensory issues I was experiencing with taste and lighting and whatever. And then I get later in life diagnosed with autoimmune diseases. So like that's, making me feel a certain way in my body. And it was like hard. I had to get a hysterectomy. I've been healing. Like it has been hard to be in this body. So when I say to have an hour or a couple hours of liberation, I'm not kidding. But after the fact, I noticed that I would say, like, if I had to guess, my stims dropped from whatever they'd normally be at 100%, down to maybe like 30%. And I was like, what? That's significant, by the way. And as I've been doing it over this year, I am finding that I can sit still for long periods of time. I'm not having anxiety. I'm not having impulses to get up and take action. That's something that I have always done. And yeah, I mean, the way that I'm like experiencing Nicole in body right now, I did not think was possible in my entire lifetime. And yet here we are. And so using ketamine and somatic experiencing and practices, like I am making so much progress. I feel like I want to shout it from the mountaintop. And I'm gonna get trained in somatic experiencing as a result, because I'm like, what is going on here? What's it been like for you and your body? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, largely very similar, honestly. Anxiety came onto the scene pretty young for me, which was really what I'm learning now was really me trying to mask a lot of different things and mask my own stimming behavior that would then just kind of internalize as anxiety oftentimes. So I just wanted to mention you brought up the nose thing when somebody pointed that out. I had a very similar experience that I remember like it was yesterday. I was pretty young, probably like before 10 years old maybe. And one of the ways that I would stim is my toes, like my big toe and the second toe, I would like do this number almost like a cricket. And I would be like wearing flip-flops or something. And I was doing that in school. And this girl, I remember her name and everything. She was like, Neely, what are you doing with your toes? And like, I have finger toes. I'm not ashamed now, but I was ashamed of my toes. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, you're like doing this weird thing with your toe. I can't do that with my toes. And everybody just started staring at my toes. And I was like, cool, never gonna do that where anybody can see it ever again. So I just saw the parallels there, wanted to mention that. But yeah, my entire system was riddled with anxiety for the great majority of my life. I've experienced a lot of like grief throughout my life, loss, lots of like substance use and that kind of stuff. And when I found like the therapist that I have now, who's amazing, and EMDR and IFS, but also before that, starting the ketamine, I feel like it's not only reduced a lot of like the stimming behavior that feels very involuntary, it kind of feels like now I can sense that I need to stim and I have an option of like choosing how I'm going to do that instead of it being like it just starts taking over my body. So that's interesting. I can like choose an outlet instead of it taking over. But I was to the point where, maybe even just a year ago, where wake up anxiety. Being awake means being anxious. And like, I think that it was really taking a toll on my nervous system, just being so tense and just constantly like feeling like I couldn't catch like a good like cleansing breath, and all of those things. And now I noticed the biggest difference with the combination of EMDR and ketamine. I think it was there was something that I think probably was trapped inside of my body from a loss that I experienced. It was like I was in a brand new body afterwards. It was like suddenly just relief. I still can get overstimulated in certain situations, but it's not like every single time I go to the grocery store, I have a panic attack. Like, that's how it had gotten. So, yeah, it's to say that it has changed my life is an understatement.
Yeah. Anything else that feels like it wants to be known about ketamine or your experience with it?
Yeah, actually, there is something I did want to mention. So this was definitely not like a goal or intention that I had going into this. But when I started doing the ketamine about 2.5 years ago, I was on a somewhat high dose of Vyvanse at the time, and I had been for a couple of years. And I think maybe like between 40 and 60 milligrams. And I noticed when I started doing the ketamine, I had already like worked on like TMJ. I had gotten like TMJ symptoms and like carpal tunnel syndrome from just basically hyper focusing and like being on stimulants, I guess, and being tense and anxious and all of that stuff. And so when I started introducing the ketamine, I noticed that even though I had gotten a good handle on the like TMJ and the carpal tunnel stuff, it started to come back, especially the jaw issues. And I was like, this seems like a red flag. This seems like it means something. And so I talked with my prescriber about it, and we were like, okay, well, we can give like a lower dose of the Vyvanse a try, maybe. And so basically what we identified was that from the, and keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. I don't know like all of the exact mechanisms here, but as a result of the neurogenesis and the neuroplasticity that I get from the ketamine, it essentially was lowering my tolerance for my stimulant medication, meaning I needed less to reach a therapeutic level in my system. So I like essentially tapered down from like probably 60 milligrams. I tapered down. I ended up being like, fuck this. And I ended up like going off of stimulants for a few months and just sitting with that and seeing what that was like. But now I'm on a much lower dose of stimulant than I ever was taking before. And it's more than enough. Like it's plenty. It's almost too much, and it's still a really low dose. So that was something that I feel like maybe, I mean, I don't know how much research is done about how it can affect your tolerance with medications, but that's something that was a welcomed, unexpected benefit that I got. Was just, I feel like I have a better understanding of how those affect my body.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm like in better control of how to use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. I think, yeah, that's a kind of a good point. Like some people are taking meds, SSRIs or whatever, and so like to consult with your physician on what that looks like. I never have taken an SSRI. I thought about it a couple of years. The reason that I even started doing psychedelics in the first place is because I was experiencing a moment in my life where I was just kind of stuck in some depression and anxiety, and it wasn't going away. And it was lingering for so long, which was kind of unusual to me. And I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to need like some assistance. So I started researching SSRIs and psilocybin and things. And I personally was just kind of curious to try a psychedelic first. I'm glad I did. But yeah, I mean, everyone's body's different and everyone's going to respond differently. I'm noticing like a desire to do ketamine less. Like a lot of time, there's different protocols with it. I don't know if you had something similar, but my therapist had recommended doing like 6 or 7 treatments really close together at first. I think it was like 2 a week that we're doing. So it was a lot. Like I had to carve out time in life to be able to have this experience and like integrate afterwards and like really slow down and be with it. And then a lot of people are finding success that after doing 3 or 6, some people don't even need to go back to ketamine anymore. Or some people use it regularly, ongoing as like little boosters, which is what I've been doing. And I'm finding that my time in between ketamine session to the next one is lengthening. Sometimes when you think about like taking a drug, you're like, am I gonna have to do this forever? Like, is this my new thing? And I'm not like, yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not personally worried about that with ketamine. And the other thing that I've noticed as someone who uses cannabis sometimes, every day, like, let me be honest. I usually smoke like one joint a day. And it's usually like at night to kind of help wind down. But I've found that after ketamine, I don't want to smoke. I feel so good in my body that I don't want my body to change, and it's lasting for days and weeks, which is also really interesting. Anything that you want to like add from your experience there?
Yeah, well, so I also use cannabis on a daily basis. It's more of like to wind down from my day and like kind of quiet things a little bit. And what I've noticed is that like if I do ketamine that day, yeah, I don't feel like I feel like I'm calm enough to not, when at the time of day that I might want to normally smoke, I don't feel like it's as urgent like usually, especially on the days that I do ketamine. And also it feels like if I do smoke, like either like right before or right after, like if I've played around with that, it almost feels like it kind of, I don't know, it like adds a layer of the feeling to the feeling that I don't feel like I'm benefiting from having both of them, if that makes sense. Like I don't really need to have the cannabis with it. And sometimes it feels like a distraction almost from just sitting in what ketamine did for me. On average, I've done it like once a week. And these are smaller doses than I would be doing in a clinic or something like that. And so it's almost like a weekly booster that I'll do. And as I gain a better understanding about, as I heal in general, and as I gain a better understanding about like my menstrual cycle and how that affects my moods, and how like PMDD and my luteal phase is a whole thing for me, as I'm getting more awareness around that, I'm starting to back off from doing it every single week. Now I'm doing it every other week, or the weekend comes around when I normally would do it, and I'm like, do I feel like I need this week? I haven't felt like I can't function without doing this. It really is just like I do it whenever I feel like I need to. Or I could benefit from like a cleanse, like washing my brain off, putting it back in there. That's what it feels like. It feels like like rinsing it off.
Yeah, I have a similar experience. It feels like after ketamine, there's such clarity in space. It's like you've experienced brain fog. It's like if brain fog was throughout the whole body, and it starts to get thicker and thicker and heavier after ketamine. It's like it's just gone. Yeah, it's like gone for a while. It's a really helpful, welcome feeling.
Yeah, and I feel like, we haven't talked too much about like neurodivergence specifically when it comes to doing psychedelics or doing ketamine, but I feel like the combination of ADHD and autism and complex trauma and all of that at play makes it to where it feels like it can be a lot harder for us to find safe and organic ways to break out of that default mode network. It's just like we stay in it as a protective measure, and it helps us to continue masking. It helps us to maybe feel like the way that we respond to things is less unpredictable than it can be sometimes. It feels like just sitting in that space and being like stuck is still, there's like safety in that. And so I think that having these other things like ketamine or other psychedelics to shake that up in a contained scenario, a contained environment, there's oversight of some kind, I think that we in particular benefit from it. And we almost need that. We need something like that.
We sure do need something. Yeah, I agree. I think the reason I prefer ketamine over something like psilocybin, and I work with psilocybin. And psilocybin and I have a relationship that has been formed very intentionally. Psilocybin for me feels like every single cell in my body is now open and sensing and receiving information. And I'm already, as a neurodivergent individual, receiving so much information, processing so much, a lot of sensory overwhelm in general. And so for me, taking psilocybin has turned that to 1,000. And it's been really frustrating for me because I'm my first time doing psilocybin, I had such a profound experience. It was one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had. And I loved exploring ideas that I would have been closed off to in my mind. My neurodivergent brain on mushrooms was having a lot of fun and experiencing growth but on a sensory level I couldn't handle it. And I had this one psilocybin journey where I was temperature dysregulated, hot and then cold, and I was I don't know, I felt like I was going not crazy in a psychosis way, but I was just grasping. I'm hey, let me try grounding. That's not working. Okay, let me grab Ashley's Reiki tuning forks thing. And I'm tuning all my chakras. That's not working. And it was hours of that, and I was so tired. And eventually, the only thing that helped me was I went down. I have a lake, and I went down and I laid on the dock. And the sun was on my face, and it was a very windy day, so there was wind on me, and then the water's moving me, and I felt oh, finally, my outside is matching my inside, and it brought a sense of homeostasis, and then that connection, obviously, to oneness. I was oh, of course, I just needed, the sun, I needed the wind, I needed Mother Earth, the water, and it ended up being a great experience. But that's what happens to me on that medicine. And so the reason that I pulled in ketamine into my most recent journey was to see would that help? Because I really like how I feel on ketamine, and it's a dissociative too, so it might take me out of my body some. And it was the most profound experience I have ever had. And I waited to bring in the ketamine. I was no, I want to be with the psilocybin. I want to be with what it has to teach me, and do somatic practices to attempt to cut. Well, when things get hard inside, we can't always control our external environment, right? That's a whole thing I'm doing another podcast on. It's we can in some ways, but sometimes we can't. And so how do we control our internal environment and meet it and love it and let it ride the wave? And I was doing that for as long as I could. I'm okay, it's time to bring in the ketamine. And my guide was taking notes. And if I were to pull him up right now, what you would see is Nicole suffering, intentionally suffering. And then the ketamine comes in, and it's wow, amazing, But that's my experience. Not ever I know people that do psilocybin all the time, and they have a great experience. But anyway, I love ketamine for that reason. I think ketamine combined with other things when you're doing it informed and with a guide and stuff is an interesting area to explore. I am not telling anyone to do anything. I just want to make that clear. That's been me, and something that I've consciously I'm looking at all the psychedelics that are possible. And I haven't tried all of them yet, by the way. But I'm looking at each one. I'm okay, you're calling to me. I feel I'm ready to know you. I feel I'm ready to experience the wisdom that you have for me. And then anything, I can kind of learn to attune to it. What's the right amount? When do I use this one over this one? And I think that like approaching it that way and having a guide and having, you know, a doctor who can make sure that I'm taking the right supplements or whatever is like, I was gonna say is the way to do it. That's my way to do it, right? I don't want to like put that on anyone, but like it feels like it's such a safe, informed, conscious, intentional way. And yeah, like that's the journey I'm on.
Yeah. I think that the only actual psychedelics I've done have been psilocybin and ketamine now at this point. And unless you include THC in that family, which it can also creep in there as well. But I noticed that with psilocybin, it feels like to me, and maybe it's because of my introduction into ketamine has been more clinical and more like observed and contained. But to me, it feels like psilocybin is a very active hallucinogen. So you're like, if you're just sitting still or like watching TV and doing it, for me, that's bad news. Like, I need to be moving around. I need to be feeling things. I need to have like sensory input coming in, like talking to people, that kind of stuff. It feels very active.
Being in nature, that's like a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, ketamine, which I know it's like some people can use it as like a party drug and stuff, and I'm not interested in that. But to me, it's so introspective and it's so calming that it's like in a lot of ways very, very different from psilocybin, because to me, it's like if I'm going to do ketamine, I'm supposed to have my eye mask on. I'm supposed to have my headphones on with music or sound that makes me feel safe and good. And what's been kind of interesting as I've, I guess, like gotten more comfortable doing it over time, has been like playing around with, sometimes my wife will be present while I'm on it, and she'll purposefully kind of like keep me engaged, keep me from kind of going into my own brain or my own mind or the void or whatever. And so she'll just like ask me questions, or she'll just like literally poke me and just see like how I respond. I feel very safe. Like I know that this is going to happen whenever we do this. But what's been interesting about that, because to me, again, before it was like, I don't talk, to me, words are really weird on ketamine. I don't know if that's a thing for you, but if I hear words being said, or if I try to read words, I'm like, whoa, like, no.
Oh yeah, I can't read words. Yeah, so I've had an experience with that.
They just sound weird coming out of people's mouths. They sound weird coming out of my own mouth. It's a strange thing. And so we've like played around with Becca asking me questions and keeping me engaged and a little bit more active. And what's interesting is it's allowed me to be more, something I've always struggled with is like showing my emotions outwardly when around other people, including my wife. That's just something that's always been difficult for me, like crying in front of other people and that kind of stuff. All of the things that are holding me back from doing that are offline while I'm on ketamine, so that doesn't feel as scary. Yeah. And one time she was doing that, like with me and talking to me, and something hit me about her specifically. I was like, I came to this realization that basically, like, I've always had kind of like abandonment, I don't know, stress around abandonment and like codependence, like that kind of stuff comes up for me a lot, and it has throughout my life. And I had this like epiphany basically where I was like, it makes sense now, it's hitting me now that you aren't going anywhere. Like, we're married, You like me. You aren't trying to get away. You're not like looking for an exit. I'm just like, I'm feeling like it's safe suddenly now, from now on, for me to like be who I am around you fully, 100%, without feeling like I can scare you away. Because I probably would have done that already by now if that was in the cards. But I hadn't made that connection yet in my brain that like I could have scared, all of the things that I could do to scare her away, I've already done. She's still around. And that was a very healing experience to have with her right there with me. Also, like, to have this kind of physical, it wasn't just her essence in my brain and I was having this epiphany alone. It was like I was able to be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And then she's there, right there, to be like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Like, here I am, you know?
That's so special, right? Because she's probably told you that before a million times out loud, and your brain's like, okay, she's like, yeah, that's what the gift of that altered state, not having an ego, provides, is like you just get epiphanies or embodiments or understandings in a way where it like really drops in and takes root. One of the most like profound experiences that I've ever had in my life, not just with ketamine, was with Ashley. And I can only imagine how scary it was for Ashley to know that I'm on this psychedelic journey. And she wasn't. She's done them a couple times, but like that's just not her thing. She's already like grounded and in tune with earth, and she's a different being. For me to go into a ketamine session, have my own experience, she's not there, she doesn't know what's happening, and she doesn't know what's going to happen, and what kind of insight am I going to have that maybe causes me to be like, I don't want to be with Ashley, you know, which that's possible. That happens sometimes, right? And so she was just carrying all this like anxiety around it. And on top of that, the way that she's wired, she doesn't do well with drugs at all. She can't even smoke one little baby puff of a joint without like getting an anxiety attack and like shooting off to the moon. We're just different people. And over the past several months, I had observed her really struggling with this tension, and I came home after one journey and she was being a little withdrawn and honestly kind of a little passive aggressive, and I was like, what is going on? And she just opened up to me, and she's like, I didn't sign up for this. This is like hard for me. I have judgment towards drugs in general. I think people, and they're like, I think she said something like, I think people use them to escape. And so, you know, I did my best to like hold space for her point of view and her emotions. And also, you know, share with her, like, I feel like I'm using them to go in. I am facing things that I've never faced and finding like healing and freedom and safety in my body, you know. And she's also observed that. Like, she couldn't deny that, like, I'm a better version of myself. And yet she was having her own experience with it. And, you know, and she didn't give me an ultimatum. It wasn't like we're at the place in our marriage where it's like, it's me or the ketamine. But it kind of felt like, where do we go from here? And, yeah, this was in September, a couple months ago. And then, one night, this is like, seriously, I do not know how to digest what happened. It was the night before her birthday. I had rented a really cool like Airstream trailer-y thing outside of Nashville, just a little getaway in the woods for the two of us. And before bed, I pulled out my nightly joint and started smoking it. And I was like, hey, do you want a puff? And she said yes, which we should have known. We've been through this before. But it was her birthday, and she said yes, and takes a little puff. We go inside. We're sitting at this table, and she just starts getting an anxiety attack. Her foot shaking. She's like not present in her body. And I'm like, okay, you want to do some somatic work that I've been doing with my therapist? And she's like, yes, anything. So we're doing that with her. And all of a sudden, she looks at me like she'd seen a ghost. Her face like turns white, her jaw drops. And she's like, and I go, what? What's happening? And she was just like, I completely understand why you've been doing ketamine. And she's just like, I completely understand. You have my full support. And Ashley's a very empathetic person. And so I'm just thinking like, oh, wow. Like okay, thank you. You're like, wow. Empathy. And she's like, no, like, I just kind of saw myself from your eyes. And I'm like, oh yeah, empathy. And she's like, no, I was literally in your body. Like, my consciousness had melded into your consciousness, and I literally saw myself sitting across the table from you, from your eyes, for like 6 seconds. And I was like, what? And I'm like, wait, hold on, you literally saw yourself from my eyes? And she's like, no, and like, if you know Ashley, she doesn't make things up. Like this is very authentic and a real experience she had. And she was like, no, I literally, like, when I was in your body for like 6 seconds, I felt what ketamine makes you feel like. I was able to sense you before ketamine and you after ketamine, like actually physically sense it. I was able to experience the rapid speed in which your mind works and what ketamine does to your mind. And it was just like, I don't know, like an embodiment. And afterwards she's like, I get it. I see. I know you have my full support, and everything's been freaking incredible ever since. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard?
That's amazing. Like,
it's amazing.
Again, with these things that, like, you couldn't duplicate that. You couldn't make that happen if you wanted it to happen. Like, neither of you could.
We could have talked for days and weeks, and we had, like, and she could observe the experience and whatever. Like, no, there's no conversation or convincing or anything that would have caused her to have that kind of understanding. And it changed everything for us. It was incredible. I don't think it was the drug. I think, you know, like, I have suspicions, right? Like, I think when you do a psychedelic, there is this sense of oneness that it's like you mentioned you get smaller. It's like, you know, you realize like, oh, everything is just the same thing. And I'm, you know, when my ego is here, then I'm Neely, and I have this personality type, and I have these stories from, you know, the past, and these aspirations from the future. And then I, you know, and then, but like, then sometimes the ego fades and then you're that again. And, you know, that confronts religious ideologies, ways that, like, we've known and experienced life up until that point. But again, it's absolutely life-changing. And for me, it's like, it's why I can't divorce the spiritual, existential, like, experience from it and from life now. Like, we're having experiences like the praying mantis. It's like, how did that happen, right? Like, we're having these experiences as individuals and as a couple where it's like, that's not like that's happening in real life, you know?
Right. It's not like this connection to the universe goes away when the ketamine wears off, and now you have to, like, go through the world as whatever you were before. Like, it's not like you just revert back to whatever you were before the ketamine session or before you ever did ketamine. It's like, I feel like it's given me the flexibility and the insight in order to evolve.
Yeah.
Like, it's opened that door for me. And then it has made me a more empathetic person. Like, Becca is my wife. Becca is similar to Ashley in the sense of, like, she doesn't smoke weed every day like us. she like doesn't want to. It's not like she is keeping herself from doing that. She just doesn't want to. And she is like curious about the ketamine, and maybe one day she might do it, but it's not something where she's like, ooh, like how can I like play with what you're doing, because this is obviously just like fun and games. Like she sees it as like a very like a serious kind of ritual that I'm doing. But it's, yeah, it does. I mean, there's also that thought in her mind that comes up every once in a while with the cannabis too, of like, am I losing you? Are you trying to like escape into that? Are you trying to avoid whatever the current situation is by smoking or by doing ketamine or whatever? And it's the fact that I've done ketamine and I'm doing it, and I've grown and healed so much, I can actually approach those conversations from a less defensive standpoint of like, let me do what I'm doing, or like, I get why it can freak her out sometimes. Like, it's not just a straightforward, don't mind me, I'm gonna go do like a controlled substance in the bed while you know, like live your life. Like that's it. It's kind of freaky and weird, especially if you're not doing it yourself.
Totally. Yeah, it really is. I think, yeah, like just to kind of like bring this maybe towards a closure, I think it's our life is our own independent journey. No one can live it for us. No one can heal our trauma. No one can, love us the way that we need, right? Like the quote, you are the one you've been waiting for. Like, I think that's it. I think that's the truth about life. And that is a hard truth, And it's harder when you have trauma and you've spent a lot of your life self-abandoning. And then over time, in instances like this, where you like, no, it's just me. It's me facing me, me supporting me loving me. And you do like, you start to develop that muscle memory and that like own intimacy with yourself, where it's like, okay, yeah, there might be something painful and tragic in the future that happens to me, but like I am more confident that I'll be able to show up for me. And that's everything, and then that helps heal the codependency and all the other like things, that coping mechanisms and stuff that we develop in life and ways that we get stuck. And I think that's like, for me, that's the journey, is like, how can I heal myself, support myself, love myself, and God, like, thank God for the guides, the people who are trained in this, who like have made it an entire like career and mission in life to hold space. It's not easy to sit with someone for hours and like, like navigate that and be regulated in your own system so that you can help co-regulate and all. Like, it's such a need, and it's a beautiful thing in life too when you have a partner or you have friends or coworkers or whatever, whoever you surround yourself with, like who trust you and who will be a part of that journey and helping you integrate. Like, it's the greatest thing, and not everyone can do it. Not everyone wants to do it, and that's also okay. It really is.
This whole experience has, rather than giving me kind of space from or distance from myself, which you might see other types of like recreational drugs being used for, or like alcohol, things like that. It's quite the contrary. It's like I am able to connect with my like self in the sense of like parts work. I can connect with her and with like who I am more readily. She's like ready for me at all times now. And before, it was like every person I've been in the past, I don't even know those people. I can't relate to them. I don't remember what it's like being them. And now it's all me. And it's all part of what I can bring to the table too. It's not just like, oh, we have to deal with that part of me too. It's like all of it is bringing something. And I feel like this experience has allowed me to connect with my authenticity in a way that going into it, I didn't know that that's something that I could get out of it, much less as much as I have. It's been amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think when you have the privilege in life to realize how fractured you really are, and also understanding that there are tools available that can help you pick up those pieces and love them and reintegrate them and put them together, it's the work, it's everything. And I guess maybe the last thing I would say is there's going to be people listening to this who've been considering ketamine. And so hopefully this conversation has been helpful. I think it may be a really good thing to sit with is like what you just mentioned, Neely, is like, are there parts of myself that like I can't look at? Maybe it's like a child, maybe it's the teen, maybe it's, Nicole the Christian, it's like where has she been lost? Where's their shame? Where's their fear? Where's their self-abandonment? And we all have it, but like, I think just getting to the place where you're willing to look and be honest about that. And it's like, whatever comes up, it's okay. Don't even judge it. Like, just, I don't know, I guess that's my encouragement. Like, just be brave enough to ask the question and know that there are things in life like ketamine that can help you go towards it and experience so much like love and freedom and liberation on the other side. So that's I think that like I would love to talk to you again. There's probably so many other things we could explore, but I'm noticing it's getting dark and James is here, so I'm kind of like feeling like it's time for me to transition into my next journey. Thank you so much, Neely, and good luck with, I want to say like good luck with the business you're building. Neely's a neurodivergent coach, really spends a lot of time helping people with ADHD. And I think, like outside of ketamine, there's just so many things like pieces of information that she can provide you that's valuable, sitting with you literally just to make sure that you can like have accountability to get something done. There's a lot of services that she offers people who need support, so check her out. Anything you want to say, Neely, before we go?
Thank you for these conversations in general, and thank you for inviting me into this project. And I just really appreciate you in general. But yeah, hit me up, find me. I'm the only Neely Kimey in the entire world, so I'm not that hard to find. Here I am. I'm the only one.
You're the only one. Oh, well, I'm glad to know you, and thanks so much for this conversation. And I can't wait to watch your video, your journey. We'll get that out there at some point. Here we go.